Dairy Queen is one of those classic brands. It's a chain of restaurants that I'm sure most of us have been to. I couldn't even tell you how many of their cones I've had over the years with their little cube swirl at the top. Sometimes I think of them as my local ice cream shop because it can feel that way, but this is a big business. Globally, they have over 7,000 locations that generate billions of dollars in sales each year, and since around 60% of those are in the United States, that makes them one of the largest fast food restaurants in the country. I think that's impressive. So for today, I want to take a look back at the story of Dairy Queen while highlighting what I believe to be some of the most significant factors behind their growth and success. Starting with the very product that Dairy Queen is built around, soft serve. And just so we're all on the same page, I'm talking about the softer, fluffier ice cream type stuff that comes out of the machine. It has less milk fat, so the different composition, texture, and temperature make it more attractive to many people as opposed to the traditional stuff that you'd scoop out of the container. Now, there is a lot of debate out there about this, but J.F. McCullough, the founder of Dairy Queen, may or may not have invented it. It was definitely either him or Tom Carvel, who we know from the Carvel ice cream brand. See, in 1934, Tom Carvel would sell ice cream from the back of his truck. On Memorial Day of that year, he was in Hartsdale, New York when he got a flat tire. So he pulled over and rushed to sell his remaining inventory before it was melted and ruined. That was a big day for him because it made him see the advantage of selling from a single location, and it made him see the demand for melty, soft ice cream. A couple years later, he established an ice cream shop very close to where he got that flat tire and had a patent for some kind of soft serve machine. After another 3 years, in 1939, he was building and selling those machines to other places who would use it to serve ice cream. Compare that story to J.F. McCullough, who, according to sources around him, seems to have had the idea of selling soft ice cream for quite a while, but was a little slow in implementing it. In 1927, he started an ice cream making business with his son Alex in Davenport, Iowa. It's right on the Illinois border, and there's a group of cities right around there, so the market was there. Plus, he used this unique process that made it a little denser, so it was successful. However, it wasn't until 11 years later, in 1938, when he got more serious about making soft serve. Famously, he teamed up with a customer and friend of his, Sherb Noble, who owned an ice cream shop in Kankakee, Illinois, to run this experiment to test the public's reaction to soft ice cream. They simply made a bunch of it in the freezer and served up scoops at a higher than normal temperature directly from it, and ran this promotion that said it was all you can eat for 10 cents. They managed to sell 1,600 in 2 hours, leading them to believe that there was a strong demand for soft ice cream. About a year later, McCullough came in contact with this guy, Harry Olds, who had a patent for this specific type of custard machine that I believe had elements that could function as a soft serve machine. So those two came to an agreement that allowed McCullough to hire a third-party dairy manufacturer to finally use that technology to make a soft serve ice cream machine that he had been envisioning for years. In 1940, 2 of those machines were used as the foundation for McCullough and Noble to open the first ever Dairy Queen in Joliet, Illinois. So I don't know, it looks like McCullough had the idea first, but Carvel was quicker in implementing it by making the machine, which I would say is more important. But the truly important thing here for Dairy Queen is that they were at least among the first to sell soft serve, and almost definitely the company to benefit the most from it over any others in the beginning and still to this day. It was practically their entire business for the first decade as they expanded from 1 location to 1,400 by the 1950s. My second reason behind their success is expanding their menu. There's a few different ways to look at this. By the 1950s, sales were slowing down. More people had air conditioning and televisions in their home, and I guess the novelty of soft serve was starting to wear off. So Dairy Queen needed to come up with something that would motivate people to leave their comfortable homes and go out to their stands. Throughout that decade, they introduced banana splits, the dilly bar, milkshakes were in 1949, all of the things that remained big sellers for them. But maybe their most important introduction was their brazier locations. That's the name of like a charcoal grill. So those were the ones that served burgers and the actual actual food. I am confident that many of the people watching this have been to Dairy Queen and ordered something that wasn't even dairy. It's been an ongoing effort to break away from it. In 2001, they introduced their first grill and chill restaurant. In 2007, they changed most of their branding away from the name Dairy Queen and toward the more simplified DQ. In 2008, they had a new CEO take over, John Gaynor, and one of his biggest missions was to expand their menu beyond their dairy offerings. And even though he left in 2018, it's continued to be one of their objectives, and I think it's safe to say that they would be nowhere near their $3.7 billion in system-wide US sales otherwise. My next reason is, and I mean no offense to the McCullough family here, but them leaving may have been the best thing to ever happen to Dairy Queen. I say that because the structure of this company was a complete mess. We do have to give them credit because they were like a pioneer in franchising, but that also meant that they didn't have an established system to follow. I don't want to get too specific because our heads are going to start spinning, but it was much more lenient and fragmented than the typical franchising system that we see today. Because of that, there was very little uniformity between the restaurants as far as how they operated, how they looked, and the products that they sold. And maybe the biggest issue in all of this was how informal these agreements were. Many of them were literally written on napkins. It was to a point where the franchisees were unclear who they had to pay money to and if their contracts were even official. It led to multiple lawsuits that were causing uncertainty and stress around the company. By that time, in 1954, J.F. McCullough and his son Alex had left the company, and it was Alex's son Hugh left in charge. That was an uncomfortable position for him, so he ultimately chose to sell the company, which, as I said, was one of the best things that he could have done. A bunch of people who had previously bought the rights to operate Dairy Queens in different territories grouped together to buy the trademarks from him, and they were the ones who started getting everything together. They took care of those lawsuits, cleared up the contracts, and forced some uniformity between most of the locations. In short, they transformed a jumbled mess into a much more traditional and efficient franchising system. Alright, my next reason behind their success is a little more fun. It's the Blizzard. What a great name for it, and if you're not familiar, it's their signature frozen treat that they commonly serve upside down with a big red spoon in it. It's essentially soft serve blended with candy, a simple enough idea that came from one of their franchisees, but it was so big for them. Shockingly, it was actually not even introduced until 1985. I know, it's hard to imagine that the world existed for so long without the DQ Blizzard, because it made such an impact. They sold over 100 million of them in that first year. It was a big contributor to their stock price almost doubling over that time, and it was followed by a period of consistently rising income. Their president at the time said that it was the biggest thing to happen to Dairy Queen in 25 years. Since I mentioned their stock price right there, I suppose I should briefly follow that up with stock repurchases. In the 1970s, their stock price fell pretty hard, and the company felt that it was undervalued, so they started buying a lot of it back from the public. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of shares each year that cost them well over $100 million in total. It was a risky move that ended up paying off because throughout the 1980s, with the introduction of the Blizzard and some other promising moves, Dairy Queen was growing fast, and the stock price kept going up. The repurchases themselves were also likely a factor. Less shares overall makes them more attractive, so it turned out to be a smart gamble and reflected in a positive way on Wall Street. The next one on my list is Orange Julius. Following the introduction of the Blizzard, Dairy Queen capitalized on the success by acquiring some other restaurant chains. In 1986, they bought this chain of over 200 popcorn shops that were commonly found in shopping malls, but the bigger one was the following year when they bought Orange Julius, who, as the name implies, specialized in fruit drinks. Kind of like a juice bar or smoothie stand that had 750 locations at the time. The plan there was to start crossing over the menu items between the chains into these combined locations that they called treat centers. Sometimes it was just certain parts of the menu, but oftentimes they were completely co-branded. They continued doing that more and more as time went on, and in 2012, Dairy Queen announced that all of their locations in the US would start selling smoothies from Orange Julius. So I think of that as like a dream team of two major fast food chains coming together. Another reason behind their success can potentially be Warren Buffett. In 1997, his company bought Dairy Queen for $585 million. And I'll admit that Warren Buffett has famously had a hands-off style toward managing them, so despite being the owner for multiple decades, I don't really have any proof that he or his company has had much of an impact. However, I can theorize a few benefits from the acquisition. The simple fact of Warren Buffett's involvement has drawn a lot of attention to the brand in the same way that a longtime celebrity endorsement might help things. He also seems to be somewhat passionate about the brand. Evidently, part of the reason that he wanted to be involved was because of a positive experience that he once had at Dairy Queen. And plus, I'm sure it's been nice to have the strong financial backing of one of the biggest companies out there. It's given them stability and I'm guessing easy access to funding when they've needed it. To finish off my list, my final reason kind of acts as an assortment of some of the others that I may have missed, but I'm going to call it staying relevant. As I said earlier, in my very first sentence of this video, Dairy Queen is a classic brand. They go back over 80 years, predating most of the other fast food chains, so a big concern is having the public view them as old and outdated. But I have to say that they have done a good job in keeping things feel new and up to date. Again, I'll mention how in 2007 they changed their logo that they had been using for almost 50 years. To go along with that, they've been updating their signs and overall designs of the restaurants. I can also cite things like consistently introducing new menu items that progress with the times, like the non-dairy dilly bar in 2020. Or how about the Blizzard of the Month? Featuring a new blizzard every month is a great way to keep things fresh and to get people to keep coming back. There's other things that could fit into this category, but the point is that Dairy Queen has continued moving forward without relying too much on their success from decades earlier. So there you have it, what I believe to be a pretty solid list in explaining the growth and success of one of the biggest, most successful fast food chains that exists today. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of that list? Is there something that I failed to mention or something that you think shouldn't be on there? When looking at it, most of them have something to do with their menu or food products in some way, which I suppose would make sense for a restaurant like this. But it does lead to the question, what is your favorite thing to get at Dairy Queen? In my opinion, it's hard to beat the classic cone, but I will also say that you have been missing out if you haven't tried the cotton candy blizzard. I feel strongly about that, so if you try it, please come back and let me know what you thought of it, and any other thoughts you have about Dairy Queen or anything else I talked about in this video, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.